ready to get serious about building content sites and building a profitable business online? Welcome to the Niche Website Builders Podcast. We bring you the latest field-tested tips, tricks, and strategies for building a profitable online asset. We interview industry experts, share customer success stories, and reveal our own experiences working on hundreds of sites to inspire and motivate you to make something happen. Let's do this.
Welcome to the Niche Website Builder Show. Today, I speak with Ben Goldberg. Now, Ben is somewhat of a veteran in the website investing space. He's been doing it for a number of years now. He's really starting to expand and build out his portfolio. However, the first site that he built is he's planning to sell this year, and it's got a valuation of 7 figures. So, he's been there, he's done it. He's built a site from scratch that he's making some serious money, and he's going to pocket him some spare change this year. So Ben actually suggested a topic that we go after, which I thought was a really good idea, which is 10 SEO strategies that most site owners don't talk about enough. So we go over some things that you probably don't hear so often or so regularly spoken about on the web. I'll give you the list just to whet your appetite. So affiliate sites don't need to have a ratio of info content to commercial content. You can outrank high DR sites with low DR sites. Design and branding matter for EAT. Word count matters a lot. Intros are the most important section of any article. You can't outsource keyword research. Expired domains are overrated but undervalued. That's a really good one and creates some really good conversation and some different views, I'd say, on that one. So that was a great conversation. Diversify your site before diversifying your portfolio. Build a portfolio in a single vertical, and the biggest competitive advantage you have is your team. So hopefully that sounds interesting. I will ramble no more. I hope you enjoy the show.
This episode is brought to you by Niche Website Builders, an agency dedicated to helping people just like you build profitable content sites. Niche Website Builders are the hands-off content site marketing agency you always wished existed. It's run by content site marketers for content site marketers, and they help both investors and individuals alike build profitable online properties. They provide a fully outsourced approach to content creation, link building, and done-for-you website builds, the same approach they use on their own 6-figure portfolios. For example, their content packages come with a proprietary keyword research process, are written by in-house native English speakers, formatted using templates proven to convert, and uploaded to WordPress with affiliate links added so that all you need to do is hit the publish button. Check them out at nichewebsite.builders/show. That's nichewebsite.builders/show and fill out the form to get coupon codes for 10% more content or a 10% discount on links with your first order sent right to your inbox.
So I'd like to welcome to the show, Ben Goldberg. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Mark.
So Ben is someone that's worked with Niche Website Builders for a while. He's been building out his own sites and portfolio. And we decided to catch up on this podcast. But Ben made it kind of easy for me. He suggested the topic. And so I haven't really had to do too much kind of research and stuff on this one, which is really good. So thanks for that, Ben. And essentially, what we're going to go through, so I think this is a really good topic. So it should give us lots to talk about. But the things we're going to go through today is 10 SEO strategies that most site owners don't talk about enough. So I think that's really, really good. Ben, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself shortly?
Yeah, brief background. I've been running different businesses since about 2010, mostly online. I've done some offline businesses. One of my bigger projects over the last 10 years actually was a SaaS business. I founded a software as a service in the fitness space. It was basically a software that just helped fitness coaches manage their clients' training. And I exited that business in 2019. It was sort of a win-win exit for everybody. And through that business, I actually got into a lot more SEO, driving traffic to that website, using SEO strategies. And so it was just sort of a natural fit to transition into content sites. And so now I'm actively working on 4 sites at the moment. I own a few more, but actively working on 4. And I just recently purchased my first site as well. So starting to get into a little bit more, maybe you could say that the flipping model as well.
Awesome. Cool. So you're really extending your portfolio now. So it's 4 sites, including that one you just bought, is that? Or does that make number 5? 4
sites, including the one I bought. Yeah. And just to give you sort of a sense of the scale, I'm planning on actually selling my biggest site this year. And so I've been getting it valued through different brokers, and each broker believes it's a 7-figure business. So that's sort of the scale, and then all the way down from there, I have sites that are one site that's not making any money, and then other sites that are doing sort of mid 4-figure range.
Awesome. All right, we've got lots to get through, so we'll get straight to it. We've got to set a stopwatch so that we only spend 5 minutes on each topic. Otherwise, we could spend an hour on one, I think. So
I think so, yeah.
So we're going to be strict and make sure that, we keep the podcast down to around an hour in total. So first one that we're going to talk about is, and I'm going to let you lead on these because these are yours. Sure. Affiliate sites don't need to have a ratio of info content and commercial content.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the updates recently, people have been really focused on, the updates have been really focused on affiliate sites, affiliate content, commercial content. And I believe that there is, the common wisdom that is coming from all these updates is that there needs to be some sort of ratio, some sort of magic ratio between affiliate content and informational content. And I think that's essentially, it's not looking at the actual content, the quality of the content, first and foremost. So it's saying you can still publish bad content so long as you have, 80% of the other content on the internet, being informational. I mean, that obviously doesn't make sense. Most affiliate sites do affiliate content really poorly. I think we can all think of examples of that, but there are sites that are still winning, really solid sites that are still winning, that have majority affiliate content, 90% affiliate content, 100% affiliate content, that for whatever reason, people aren't talking about. And when you actually look at these sites that are pure affiliate sites, they're just doing the content way, way better than the competition. I think that the Google algorithm is becoming very smart with identifying, what is good, high quality affiliate content and what's not. I'll give you 2 examples. These are 2 sites that I've found recently, not in my niche, but just as an example for this podcast. One is thatfitfriend.com. Now, this site is actually owned by a buddy of mine, and he said it was okay that I could, share the domain. It's a new site. It's seen an incredibly fast trajectory. And it's 100% affiliate content. Every single article has affiliate links. Every single article is either targeting, an individual product review, a comparison, or a roundup. And if you actually look at the content, it is far and above what you would ever see on a classic affiliate site. I mean, this is somebody who actually uses the products, tests the products. Pretty much every single page comes with a YouTube video of him showing the product. He's setting up tests between products. Another site that does pretty much 90% affiliate content, weartesters.com. It's another site sort of looking at shoes and apparel. And I think it actually only does basketball shoes and apparel. It has something like 300,000, organic traffic on Ahrefs, and you'll see the trend line. It is not affected by Google algorithm updates. It's a fairly boring, consistent sort of traffic levels, increases slightly over time. And I think the difference is not that there's informational content. It's just that their level of expertise as they're talking about those those commercial type products is just far and above the competition. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I think historically people wanted to do like lots and lots of affiliate content because it can be quite profitable, right? It's the easier way to go, or not the easier way to go. It can be quite profitable. So I think I think it's all down to the quality of the commercial content, the same as you. I think that I think there's no reason why you can't, or we shouldn't consider including kind of more informational content. I think just because ad revenue is increasing, our revenue is getting better, it's kind of and easier to rank. So you've kind of got that mix now where actually you can make a decent income just from ad revenue, and it's easier to rank. But and I think that's historically that's why people would go so passionately down the 100% affiliate route, because the ad revenue wasn't good. Right. Affiliate revenue was a good moneymaker. But I totally agree that there is definitely has been talk of ratios and things like that. But on this one, for sure, I would agree with you that it's not really about ratios. It's about how good the quality is. And I think if you think about the Google product review updates as well, you know, a lot of the review content is poor quality because it's just regurgitating the product, you know, what's on the product website. Essentially, it's not adding any, it's not really reviewing it. It's just telling you what the features are, which
right. And actually if you look at the Google guidelines around product reviews, I mean, they've made it super clear, like I think there's 10 points or 12 points or whatever. And it's very easy now to look at those as standards and be able to integrate that into your content briefs, right? And give examples for your writers to say, okay, this is how this point should be represented in the article. I mean, one of the points is like, you should be comparing between products, right? And so like using language, like, you know, using this product compared with that product, this one performed better for these specific reasons. Like, it's not just giving a brief description of the product, the features, and exactly what you said, like on the sales page. It truly does need to be sort of comparison. I mean, that's one of the points. And again, you can go through each one of those points, but so long as I think that those are checked off and that's how Google is viewing quality, it doesn't matter that, I mean, you should have informational content on the website because I think it does diversify your monetization and ad revenue is great, as you said. But yeah, I think we're on the same page when it comes to this sort of myth of there's some sort of magical ratio.
Cool. So we've done 6 minutes. So we're going to skip us on to the next one. So the next one is you can outrank high DR sites with low DR sites.
Right. So I think this comes down to actually the keyword research strategy. So the common belief, I think, is that SERPs that have high DR sites, ranking 1, 2, and 3 is high competition, and you shouldn't compete, especially if you're a new site with low DR. Now, what I believe is that you can actually outrank these higher DR sites so long as you're interpreting the SERPs properly. So just because a high DR site is ranking number 1 doesn't mean that it's actually going to be competitive for you, the specific keyword that you want to target. I'll give you an example in a second. But what I believe is Google is turning up the relevancy part of their algorithm. And I don't just mean like domain level relevancy. I think there's a lot of talk about domain level relevancy, but I think it has more to do with page level relevancy. So it used to be that you could write sort of these catch-all articles that included multiple different search queries. And those articles still rank. I guess it depends on the, I guess it depends, but those articles still rank. But if someone comes along with a more laser targeted article, that is just targeting one aspect, and goes into far more detail, providing more examples, just very specific to that search query, I think that the relevancy will trump those catch-all articles. And so I'll give you an example here just so that you understand. So often you'll have high DR sites ranking for obviously hundreds of thousands of keywords. So you have a site like Healthline. Now, Healthline is, because my sites are all in the health and fitness niches, I compete with Healthline all the time. And so this is a tactic that I use against Healthline. Now, this isn't a keyword that I would ever go after, but if you search sciatica stretches, right? Sciatica, it's a nerve, goes down, from your butt down to your ankles, and it can cause a lot of pain if it's compressed. So people, use stretches to help alleviate pain. So if you Google that, so if you looked at sciatica stretches up on Ahrefs, Healthline is getting a potential traffic of 115,000, right? So it's a massive keyword. But that one article, so if you Google sciatica stretches, it ranks for over 7,000 keywords, right? Now, one of the keywords that it ranks for is a specific type of stretch, right? So it's sitting pigeon pose for sciatica. Now, this might seem like a random keyword, and it is, but it's ranking, Healthline is ranking number one for that sitting pigeon pose for sciatica with their broad sciatica stretch article, right? So the keyword sitting pigeon pose for sciatica, on Ahrefs, it gets 200 search volume, right? Now that may or may not be important for Healthline. I would imagine it's not, that 200 search traffic is not too important for Healthline. But for, a niche site, that could represent anywhere between 1 to 5 times that actual amount. So you have the potential probably between 200 and 1,000 page views a month if you could rank number one for that keyword. So it could be quite meaningful. Now, if you go to the section within the Healthline article that has, basically all the stretches for sciatica, that one specific stretch only represents 58 words out of the entire article, right? It's such a small segment of the article, but if you Google it, it's ranking number one, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you were like a physio site, you had maybe a few backlinks, like you weren't completely new. You had maybe a moderate base of articles, maybe like 30 to 50 articles. I think you could rank number one for this keyword and beat Healthline, this specific stretch, this sitting pigeon pose for sciatica. You're not ever going to probably rank for sciatica stretches, but what you could do is rank for subsets and start sort of siphoning traffic away from that main keyword. So I guess coming full circle, like I hope that example made sense, but if you're like, basically when you're analyzing the SERP for competition, you don't just want to assume because it's a big high authority website, like, oh, it's Healthline, I'm never going to beat it. It's like, well, is there a long tail version that they're also ranking number one for that article that you could go after because it's just going to be higher on the relevancy?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's all about keyword research. And if anything, that's a good indicator. That's a good thing to say, okay, what are they targeting with that article? Are they targeting that exact term or something more broad? And I think that actually makes a good keyword if you've got high authority sites that are broadly covering topics rather than like the specific topic. So actually, I think that can be a good sign, a good point. So yeah, I would totally agree that it's kind of all about the long tail. They're not going to go after that one stretch with one article. They're never going to go after that because it's too small for them.
Right. And there could be, like, from that one article, like just going back to sciatica stretches, like, I mean, you could probably find 10 or 15 articles that you could write that could bring in, 5 to 10,000 page views a month, just from looking at how can you sort of siphon off, longer tail, more specific keywords from that main result. Especially if you're dealing with, an article that is ranking for 7,000 keywords. I mean, one thing that you can do just practically is if you look on Ahrefs, if you look to see, okay, Healthline, that one article is ranking for 7,000 keywords, we'll go into the 7,000 keywords, right? See, sort by position, see what they're ranking number one for. And oftentimes you'll see, like, out of the 7,000, there's maybe 300, number one positions that they're ranking for different keywords. And maybe there's 10 or 15 out of the 300 that you could probably go after because it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Just narrowing in on the relevance, I think. Yeah. So
yeah.
I agree. Okay. So next one. This one's an interesting one. So I'm interested to hear what you've got to say about this one because, I suppose there's quite a few angles you could take it, but design and branding matter for EAT.
I mean, I think that the common belief is just like get your site up and running and publish content, and design is sort of not top of mind. Like, and I do agree with that sentiment, because I think people can get really bogged down with, trying to make their design perfect. But my belief is that like a well-designed, users will trust a well-designed site, a nice looking homepage, perhaps custom, icons, custom infographics. And, you obviously don't know this for sure, but I mean, there has to be some piece of the algorithm that can pick up on design. I mean, like, regardless if it's a direct algorithm measure, right, for design, right? It's not like, I don't know, it's not the algorithm's personal opinion whether they can, whether they like it or not, but there certainly are indirect measures, I think, right? I mean, if you have a well-designed site, it becomes memorable. So it becomes memorable. It's trustworthy, right? I mean, we've all been to sites that are poorly designed, and you're just like, do I really trust this information? And so it becomes less memorable. But if it's trustworthy, it becomes memorable. You start associating yourself with that brand, that website. I think it will increase, for example, direct traffic, because people will be searching out your website more. And I definitely think that direct traffic is like, if somebody's searching your brand, I definitely believe that is a good indicator to Google that this is a site that people are looking for, that is trustworthy. So like these brand searches, right? I've also, and this is pretty common knowledge, and if it isn't, then it's probably something to work on. It does help with link building, right? And the reason why I know this is because if somebody reaches out to me for a guest post and I check out their site, and I might agree to a guest post, from time to time. But if I look at their site and it's just a blog roll on the homepage, I don't want to link to that. Like, it just looks really, really bad. And so I think it does help your link building if you have strong design. Obviously, that is an indirect measure, when it comes to eat. So yeah, I don't know, like a homepage that's just stock photos, a blog roll. I would imagine if it's not already somehow directly measured with Google, I think it will be in the future. Like, I think Google will become smart enough to be able to pick up on good design. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, so I was interested to see where you go on this, because I was going to essentially go down the opposite of you, but no, I totally agree with everything you've said there. I think my view is that I love you're talking about the indirect measures, and I'll add another one into the mix. Like, if you've got a good site and people like it, it's going to lower your bounce rate potentially, and they're going to, and that's going to again indirectly kind of improve, your chance of kind of ranking, because you've got a lower bounce rate. But I also think that there is kind of measures of design, not like you say, the personal opinion of the algorithms, but they're going to look at things like like if you know anything about HTML, like how nested the HTML is and things like that. If it's like super, super nested and like it's not well structured, it doesn't make sense. Like, the chances are the design's not that great too. So I think well-structured pages are helpful as well for Google potentially liking or disliking the site. And I mean, I think that's probably a small ranking factor. It's probably some of these indirect things we've spoken about are probably more of a factor than that. But from what you've said, I totally agree. There's a number of indirect factors that you're going to be impacted on depending on the design of your site.
Yeah, I think those indirect factors add up though over time. I think, right. And it's sort of like, I guess the question becomes like, like, when do you focus on design? Because, people can get really distracted about it, right from the get-go in terms of what their site looks like on a fresh install. But it doesn't actually require that much effort. Like, I mean, you can hire, like, if you don't know how to do it yourself or whatever, and certainly a lot of themes can take care of it for you. But I mean, like, for like $250 or $500 just on Upwork, I mean, you can get somebody to just come in and do the site the way that you want, that the way you want the site. So that's just set up for scaling. yeah, I really appreciate going to sites that are just really well designed, custom designed. All the bigger sites are custom designed, right? And I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to slow down your site. There's ways that you can do your design and still keep it sort of light and fast and all of that. But yeah, I'm just doing. I take a look at sites all the time. I do niche research for tons of different sites all the time, and I came across one recently, and I was just like, I can't even believe this is a site in 2022. Like it just blows me in what way that people just don't focus on it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. In the interest of keeping it moving. So word count matters a lot. So really interesting to hear what you got to say about this one.
So the way that I view this is actually a little bit, it's not just pure word count. I think word count can be a measure for quality. And I'll give you some examples here. So I think the common belief is like, let's just create a piece of content that is the minimum amount in terms of word count as possible that will get it ranking. And typically this looks like, just looking at the competition and just doing the average of what the competition is doing, maybe a bit more. But I think this comes from a stance of like, I'm trying to just get the cheapest output possible, right? Like what's the cheapest amount that I can pay per word in order to get this article ranking. But my belief is that actually word count can be a measure for higher quality content. So I'll mention, now quality content is sort of a big topic, but I'll mention two things and I'll give some examples. One of the things that I try to get my writers to do is being more specific. So this often is explaining the hows and whys behind a specific statement. And I'll give you a very, very specific example. This is an example that I give like my own writers in sort of our content briefs. So if you Google tips on marathon training, right, what do you expect? You expect probably like a big list of tips for training for your first marathon, right? Now, if you Google that, there's a ranking there that has, I think, 22 tips, right? And one of them is just build core strength. So that's one of their tips. Now, I'm going to read this straight from my content brief here because this is the actual statement about build core strength. So they say, strength and core exercises are the perfect complement to running. Core strength plays a vital role in stabilizing your entire body during running by maintaining a neutral pelvis and delaying the breakdown in your form when you're fatigued. Not only does core work strengthen your body and prevent injuries, but it also helps improve your running economy. That's all they say about the topic. And to me, I'm like, so first of all, let me ask you, Mark, like, what do you think is wrong with that? Like, do you see anything wrong with that statement?
What you mean wrong as in incorrect, or do you mean wrong as in just like...
I don't mean wrong as in like not factual information. I just mean like, would you consider that like high quality content?
No, because it doesn't like, it's like, it kind of, there's no detail there, right? At all. Like what is build cost? Yeah. It's like saying travel to the moon without giving the instructions. Like,
right. Exactly. and this is an article that's, bringing in tens of thousands of page views a month. I think it's ranking number 3 or number 2 for tips on marathon training. So like, in my opinion, it's like, okay, they say like core strength maintains a neutral pelvis, but like, why is that important? Right? Like, well, maybe a neutral pelvis helps activate the glutes and it helps, transfer strength from your lower body into the ground. Right. What does a neutral pelvis look like? Right? Like maybe somebody doesn't even know in terms of like running mechanics, what that looks like. How can you tell that you have a weak core? Right? Like, what are the signs? They say core work prevents injuries. Well, like, what injuries? Right? And then the big question here is just like, they're saying that like a tip is to build core strength, but like, how do you do that? Right? Like, how do you actually build core strength? So at this point, what happens is a reader will come to this article and they're recognizing, okay, well, I think core strength has something to do with good marathon training. They have to go back to Google and they have to make another search in order to actually find out more about core strength and running, the relationship between the two, and how to actually improve their core strength. And what we want to try to do with our sites is we want to keep them on our sites, and we want to make sure that they're getting all the information that they need in that article. They don't have to go back to Google and make another search. And so, like, what we need to include is, here are 3 core exercises that runners do. What is the exercise and how do you perform it? And then maybe you actually do have another article on the website that is, like targeting the keyword best core exercises for running. And, where you have a full list of complete 10 exercises, and it includes, sets and reps and maybe even a training program. But you can see how, like, I don't know how many words that is, like what this article has in terms of build core strength. Maybe it's 75 words, but that section should easily be like 300 words, right? It should be like 4 times the length. And so, like, I think that word count can be a measure of quality from that perspective, in terms of just being more specific and covering all of the hows and whys behind a statement. I'll also give it just another quick example here. Word count can also, so another important factor, I think, when it comes to high quality content is original research. Now, this is something that Income School, I know you had a Ricky from Income School on your podcast recently, and this is something that they preach all the time, and they give some really good examples of this. So in product reviews, this is like testing the product, right? Like testing the product, and this is considered original research. And when you actually test a product and you have that sort of original research, it's going to add to the word count, because you're talking about the test, how you set it up, what the results were. In informational articles, I don't think this is done nearly enough, but it's getting quotes from experts, right? It's doing Facebook polls. It's actually calling businesses. Like we've called businesses before. I'll give you an example from one of the articles that we just published on our sites. Is we were writing an article about gyms, and there was a specific topic about gyms that we wanted to cover, and it wasn't in. I couldn't find the information on any of the sites, on any of the gym websites, and so we actually called 50 gyms, right? And when we asked these people exactly what we wanted to ask them, and so when you're covering that sort of in-depth research on your sites, it's going to add to the word count. Quotes, I think, is another one, right? You can get quotes from experts. I recently got a quote from a coach who coaches a professional sports team, right? And so we can quote that expert and say, well, here's why we disagree. Here's why we agree with it, right? And here's from our experience, how do here's our experience, here's their experience, and here's the conclusion, right? And so, yeah, I do think word count matters a lot. I think that, on average, like when I'm looking at my sites, I'm publishing way more word count than any of these people. But I also think it helps sort of, I don't know, bulletproof the articles in a way, because somebody will sort of come along and see that article and be like, there's no way I want to compete with that. I'm just going to move on to another keyword.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I think. Yes, a couple of things I can't add to that, I guess. So I think historically, there has always been like content quality. For a time, content quality and length became synonymous with each other in terms of SEO. So people thought, and it worked, right? Writing longer content is going to improve the quality as such just by writing more, which obviously it isn't. But in the eyes of Google, okay, if you're longer, then you're probably more in depth, and therefore going to rank you higher. And it kind of worked for a while, but I think Google's getting smarter. They are smarter about that now, and you can't just say, "I'm just going to write 10%, 20% more words." Right. And I think the thing is like, I think you've got to start considering, well, what is a reasonable length for the article that is being written. So if you're writing an article on, say, can dogs eat bananas? Now, that doesn't need to be 5,000 words, right? That can probably get away with 500 words, and that's probably fine. And that's maybe what Google might expect. And the other thing to kind of bear in mind as well is and it'd be interesting to see what you found with what you've done here, or if you've done any analysis on this. But if you've got to be careful not to be too different from, this is kind of where correlation SEO comes in, where tools like Market News and things like that is that if you're too different to the rest of the SERPs, then you're considered to be, the odd one out, and therefore you're less likely to get ranked because everyone else has written 2,000 words on this topic. Therefore, 2,000 words is probably enough to cover it. And if you then go and write 5,000 words, you might get excluded from the SERPs actually because you're different to the rest. So, interested in your thoughts on that.
I think like going back to the example of like build core strength. I mean, like if you wanted to tackle that article, tips on marathon training, you would 100% have build core strength, right? Like that's where sort of that correlational SEO comes in. It's like, if all the other articles on page 1 are mentioning build core strength, you're 100% including build core strength. But I think that if you see an opportunity to add more detail in the way that I'm describing, like, hey, like give the 3 core exercises, give the sets, the reps, the technique on how to do them specifically for running. It's like, it's going to add to the word count, and that should not factor into your decision around like, well, I'm trying to only make it the average of all of the other ones, because I think it's just going to be a better piece of content. So I think like correlational SEO more so comes down to the structure of the article, right? Like, I mean, if you're not writing if everything is including, if everything on page 1 is showing like a listicle, like you're putting a listicle, right? If 80% of the articles have this one tip, you're probably going to include that tip, but you can do it better. And sometimes better, again, this is not always the case, but sometimes better in this particular example means probably adding word count.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess really what we're talking, I guess the focus at this point isn't really the word count. It's like, how do I cover a topic and do it well in the detail that it needs? And it just so means that probably if you're going to do that, you're going to be end up writing more words, I guess is what we...
often that's the case. Most often it's like, there's a lot of, so recently I got into the diet niche, and there's a lot of topics that are in this diet niche that I'm going after, where the articles are 1,000 words and mine are 2,000, right? And I'm not purposely trying to go over, I'm not purposely trying to say I'm going to do double. I'm just saying I'm going to cover this in way more detail. I'm going to give the reader like far more information than what these other sites are covering. And the other sites are just saying, okay, all I need is 1,000. I'm going to put 1,000, but it's leaving out a lot of information that the user is going to need to know. Like, the user doesn't know what they don't know. And so you have to give them that information regardless of, whether you could probably rank with 1,000 or not. It's like, they're going to need this information. It's sort of a medical type niche. It's like, give them that information. In my experience, it's just more. So yeah, it's just more word count. And you can certainly have more word count where it's, fluff, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Sure. Okay. We're going to move on to the next one, which I'm not sure where we're at to. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5. Intros are the most important section of any article.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but intros, you're either going to win or lose the user. In the intro, I think that the user's trying to figure out whether you know what you're talking about and whether they're going to get their problem solved and how quickly they're going to get their problem solved. So in my opinion, there's sort of it's formulaic in terms of the what an intro should include. And most often what I see is a lot of these components missed. And I'll give you an example. So the components are, I think that you need to acknowledge the user's problem. And that actually, you have to acknowledge the user's problem because you understand the problem. And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. They don't actually understand that every single search that somebody makes, it's because they're trying to solve a problem. And you have to really come at it from that sort of problem solution standpoint. The next piece that I see, the next piece of criteria is that you have to meet the user with where they expect to be met with their current level of understanding. So any keyword is going to, you can assume what that user knows or doesn't know based on their search, right? So what searches would that user have had to have made before they arrived at that specific search query? What search queries after that search are they going to have to make right? By making this one search query. So what do they know? What do they don't know? I think, intro should also give a brief and direct answer, like to their problem. And this is like, obviously for that snippet optimization, it's sort of a good opportunity to do that. And then, you see a lot of people just sort of, they don't give a value proposition for for reading the rest of the article. Now, so they'll say something like, keep reading to find out my top 10, whatever. And it's like, don't tell somebody to keep reading. You need to convince them to keep reading. And so like, it's like you have to provide some sort of value proposition to get them to keep reading. Now, usually the way that one way that you can do this is usually through some sort of negative psychological, emotional thing, right? So I'll give you an example. Let me just give you an example. So just before we hop on the call here, I wanted to sort of see what came up for best golf clubs for cold weather, right? So that's the keyword. Now, if you actually go to I think it's the number 1 result, or maybe it's the number 2 result. It's a Golf Digest result. Now, Golf Digest is going to rank for a lot of things related to golf because it has the authority and it has the brand, and a lot of people are just going to trust it because it's Golf Digest. But it's actually a really, really bad intro. It's objectively a bad intro. So here's their intro, right? So extending the golf season as late as possible is the goal of any golfer in colder climates. If your course is open and you have the proper cold weather golf gear, you can play well into the winter if you're prepared. When it comes to apparel, insulating layering is key to providing warmth without impeding the swing. This is all fluff. That's all fluff. It's a general statement about cold weather and apparel generally, right? It has nothing to do with cold hands and gloves. It's just a bunch of nonsense about cold weather. And then, so anyways, then they move into winter hats or ear covers are a must. Wool socks will keep your feet cozy, but too many golfers don't prepare their hands enough. Well, it's like, okay, finally you get to a point. So you mentioned ear covers and wool socks. It's like, they don't care about that. They only care about that last piece, which is their hands, right? The golfer is, whoever's searching this is a golfer, and they're already preparing their hands, right? So you're saying too many golfers don't prepare their hands enough. It's like, this golfer is already preparing to get their hands ready for cold weather because they're searching this keyword, right? Then they move on and say, a regular golf glove will not typically provide enough warmth or grip in cold or wet conditions. With the right winter gloves or hand warmers, all your golf is possible no matter where you live. Now, this is the first time where they actually mention what the problem is. And the problem is that if you're buying a glove for, golf in the winter, it's probably going to affect your grip, right? But yeah, so that's the part that I think that needs to be focused on a lot more. And then their value proposition is that, with the right glove, all year golf is possible, right? Which I don't think is enough of a value proposition to just keep reading. So I wanted to actually provide this example and sort of rewrite it because I think that it can be done a lot better. And so here's how I would structure something like that, right? If you're golfing later in the season, hand warmth is a critical part of your game as cold hands can lead to grip issues, which will impact the accuracy of your swing. Boom. The problem is understood, right? It has to do with the grip. The wrong glove will create grip issues. What does that mean? It means that the accuracy of your swing is going to be impacted. So automatically that user knows that you understand the problem. Then you can say something like, trust me, I live in Canada where golfing on a September morning can be 10 degrees. Trust established. I'm experiencing your problem. I have the same problem as you. Then you can go on to say, I've tested 5 gloves over the years and the best golf glove for cold weather is XYZ. The challenge of finding a warm golf glove is that you need to balance the thickness of the glove with the tactile sensation of the golf handle. The whatever glove has struck this balance the best out of any of the gloves that I've tested. That's the brief answer and the direct answer that people are looking for. You can put an affiliate link in there. And then here's where, you can say some sort of negative emotional sort of appeal to keep them to keep reading. some of the golf gloves I reviewed are not actually intended for golf, but rather other outdoor activities that occur in cold weather environments like football. This is because even the golf gloves that are marketed towards cold weather products performed worse, right? So you're like, okay, if I don't keep reading and I just go with a general golf glove, maybe I'm going to miss out on some important, some other sort of glove that I would never even consider. And so it sort of makes them feel like they're going to miss out, and I got to keep reading. So you're going to win or lose people in those intros. Like, I just think that oftentimes when I'm working with writers and I hire them for the first time, like the first 2 months, I'm like hammering them on proper intros and how to set up an intro like that, especially when it comes to product reviews, because like fluff isn't going to get you anywhere, right? It's not going to lead to conversions. It's not going to even lead to people just getting past the intro. They're probably going to head back to Google if that's the case.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a number of indirect factors as well. If they're not going to continue with the rest of the article, they're not going to click your affiliate link. If they bounce straight back again, but bounce rate's going to be high if they're bouncing straight back. I'd also add to that. I mean, you mentioned briefly there that from a technical perspective, like that's your goal. If the article is featured snippetable, if that's a word, then the intro is the place where you want to, where it's highly likely that the featured snippet is going to be grabbed from. Well, I say that, so this comes on to my point, I guess, is that I'd also say that the opening sentence or the open paragraph for any subheading is really important for the same reason, especially in particular for like FAQ style article, or if you're doing an FAQ in an article, because FAQs generally are quite feature snippetable. If you start with some fluff under that, because Google really wants to take the first sentence or two underneath that subheading, and if that's just nonsense, it's probably not going to take it. So it's really important to get that right as well under the first opening sentences of subheading too.
Especially if the subheading is a question, right? So if the subheading is a question, right under the subheading should be a direct answer to that question. Now, even if there are caveats and you can probably expand onto it, in multiple paragraphs, the first paragraph underneath of that subheading should directly answer the question in that sort of featured format, 300 characters and sort of just directly answering it. And that's the same thing for the intros, right? Like if somebody's Googling like, best golf glove for cold weather, it's like, well, say like the best golf glove for cold weather is, what is it? And then the reason why in the next sentence. And that's going to be the featured snippet. Yeah. Blows me away that I mean, even just a pretty big keyword like this, like the featured snippet is still not optimized, right?
Yeah. It's an opportunity. Cool. So move on to the next one, number 6. You can't outsource keyword research. So immediately I disagree with this one. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say to convince me otherwise.
Well, I mean, there are lots of services now that will just create a hit list for you, right? That will come up with a list of articles. And so maybe it's the keyword and the article, and maybe some other information, maybe like word count or something like that. And I just think that if you're not the one who is doing keyword research, or at least involved in the keyword research process, you're going to be missing out on a lot of potential directions that your site could go. I also feel like a lot of keyword service providers, and I've hired a couple just out of curiosity, just because, not that I wanted to actually use the services, but just because I'm like, well, what are they producing? And oftentimes I'm getting rid of 50% of the hit list because they actually don't understand the niche, right? They don't understand actually how to gauge competitiveness. So, perhaps the hit list that they've provided is just way too competitive. And then in other cases, it's like they've identified a cluster, right? They've identified a keyword, and they've given that keyword in sort of isolation. And they haven't actually provided other articles that would relate to that to help it sort of form its own unique cluster on the website. I don't think you can be publishing disparate content. I think it has to be part of a specific cluster. So if you're going to go after a keyword, you should probably find 3, 4, 5 other keywords that relate to that topic to help it sort of build its relevancy on your site. And I don't think a lot of keyword research service providers understand that piece as well. But mostly, I just think that if you're doing the keyword research, you start to get into these rabbit holes of, oh, wow, here's an interesting opportunity that just opened up, 10 or 20 new keywords.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is missing in a keyword research service is just because you have a single keyword, it doesn't help you actually understand, well, like what are the subheadings within that article? Because sometimes the subheadings are targeting sort of secondary keywords. And so if you haven't done the keyword research, you don't really know, okay, like this is the main keyword that we're going to go after, but these other sub keywords are going to go as sort of subheadings. And so I at least from my experiencing hiring these types of service providers, the list is incomplete from those perspectives.
Yeah. It's okay. You've turned me around a little bit. So, so I totally agree. Like I also tested out a bunch of services. Like I haven't done it for a while now, but it's like before we started Niche Website Builders, and it was like trash, most of it, to be honest. If I'm not like it was kind of like, it was almost like they've just typed a phrase into Ahrefs and then that exploited the Excel sheet for you without any kind of thought or analysis. So I agree, like quite often that is tragically bad, or at least it was when I tried it. I think there's definitely scope for what you said there. Where if you know the niche, then you're definitely going to know different angles that you could take it, where somebody who doesn't know the niche just isn't going to have that awareness. And whether you're an expert when you start the site or not, just the fact that you own a site and you've been working on it for a couple of years gives you, again, that kind of insight that somebody else might not have. I think it can be beneficial as well, because I know from our own, I consider us to be pretty expert level when it comes to keyword research, and we're kind of always developing our own like strategies and new ways of doing things. Like check out the Tomb Raiding SEO article on our blog for like some like stuff we've done there. And that's just one, and we do a number of different things. And I think just from talking to our customers, like we managed to uncover angles that they haven't thought about it, regardless of whether they're experts. And that's maybe because they're a little bit too close to it, that actually they're not considering the bigger picture. So I do think there's probably advantages as well to get a second opinion, but it's got to be a good second opinion. But I totally agree. If you're not in the niche, and because you don't even know what words to search for or what terms to use at that point, you get really stuck. And we do ask a lot of our customers to kind of give us some of those kind of angles that we know which rabbit holes to go down in the first place. But yeah, sorry, you was going to say something.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly difficult when you just hire a service provider only for like. I think if, for example, like if you're taking a client from keyword research all the way down that entire content production process, I think that's different. I think that if your only purpose is, okay, I'm going to hire, and there are places like this, right, that you can just hire for keyword research, and you say, okay, I want somebody else to do the keyword research, but then I'm going to take that list and then I'm going to actually produce the articles. I think that's where a lot of mistakes happen. So yeah, I mean, just like you said, it becomes if you don't know the niche yourself, basically all you're doing is just pulling lists from Ahrefs, and I don't think that's not necessarily where you're going to find those golden opportunities. Yeah.
Awesome. That was good. I guess I'll add one in for you here, and I'll see if you think you agree or disagree with this. Like, I really struggle with outsourcing internal linking, because for me, internal linking is such an important part of building out those topical silos and stuff like that. Like I still do it today on my own portfolio. I'm changing that. Because I've just got too many sites now, and it's just too much. I'm just generating too much content. I just can't do it. So I'm gonna work on that. And I actually think it's more of a fear than a reality that I can't outsource that, because it's about education. But what do you think about outsourcing internal linking?
Well, I think internal linking is extremely important. Like I think it's very underrated as sort of a strategy. So I as soon as an article is published, an internal linking process starts. So an article is published, we know exactly what other articles should be pointing to that article and what cluster it belongs to, and that happens. That happens immediately. It doesn't. So when you hit publish, we don't wait around for weeks to do it. So it's hard to outsource. I mean, I'm not the one who is going into WordPress and, editing the article and adding the link, but I'm the one who is saying to a VA that when this article gets published, these are all of the other articles that need to link to this article. And so there's, different ways that you can set up internal links. Maybe it's like a call out box, right? That says, related article, go check out this. Or it's in content, right? Like in context, like, finding a sentence, finding a paragraph that, you have just the natural paragraph text to link over to. And then there's another place that I do internal linking is just simply at the end of the article, right? Where it just doesn't fit. It's kind of like a what to read next. That's not ideal, but it's better to have the link than not. So yeah, my VAs, they know sort of the three ways that we can set up those internal links. And they've been sort of taught how to do that, and they go ahead and do the internal linking. So like the outsourcing piece for me is like the actual like grunt work of going in, editing the article, adding the link, and sort of updating the content. But I'm the one who's saying these other articles 100% need to be pointing to this other article.
Yeah. Awesome. We won't go into it now, but there's I think there's definitely a school of thought of whether silos are a thing, or clusters, or whatever you want to call them, and if they're important or not. But we'll save that for another day, because that's probably quite a big one as well. So next one we got on the list is I love this one too. This should be good conversation. Expired domains are overrated but undervalued.
So I think there's a lot of like influencers who are doing case studies on expired domains, and obviously you guys have your expired domain service. So it's guys like you who are popularizing this notion of building out sites on expired domains. Even though it's been done for a while, I just think it's becoming more mainstream now, especially services like ODYS. Pretty easy to go buy an expired domain there. I mean, you don't have to, they've already vetted it, whatever. You don't have to sift through, GoDaddy auctions yourself and, spend 100, hours, going through that process. So because they're becoming more popular, I think novice and intermediate SEOs are turning to this as as the next big tactic to use, right? I don't actually ever believe that there's a silver bullet, right? And people are sort of treating this as this is going to be the, how we build sites in the future. And you shouldn't be, there's even people who say, I'm never building out a site on a fresh domain ever again. Like it's, that there's no value in that. I just don't think in terms of expired domains being overrated. I just believe that fundamentally what is going to, take your site to the next level is quality content. And even if you build out a site on an expired domain, if it's poor content, it has a poor navigation and infrastructure, and it's a slow site, and there's all these other things that can go wrong with a site. Who cares if it's built on an expired domain or not? But I do believe it's undervalued because in the sense that like when you actually purchase an expired domain, they're still pretty cheap for, I think that for a more experienced, more expert SEO, who understands all the other aspects of how to build a good quality content site. I still think you're getting a bargain right now. I still don't think that those domains are valued at what they should be. Although I think that's maybe changing. Like, I mean, I've seen domains on ODYS that are, you know, literally over Christmas, I was looking at one that was over $10,000 on ODYS, and I'm like, this should not be $10,000, right? So there are some cases where it's just like, ugh. But for the majority, I still think that they're undervalued. But I wouldn't treat them as like I wouldn't treat this as like an SEO strategy that's going to trump all other strategies. I don't think that this is going to be, it's not going to be the silver bullet. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, I'm never going to be able to start on a fresh domain again. Is my so I mean, let me like, that's not strictly true, right? Because if you can't find that, if you really want to go into a niche and you can't find a domain, then you've got no choice. But I totally agree that it doesn't mean you can forget everything else, and that's just going to solve all your problems. But what I would say is that there's a number of reasons why, and I think there's kind of I'll leave it to last, but I think there's kind of an obscure one which you kind of wouldn't consider unless you're kind of doing it kind of at scale like we are at Niche Website Builders. And so what I'd say is that quite often, like the time to getting traffic is like drastically reduced. So the time to revenue is kind of drastically reduced. So when you kind of factor in like, okay, it might take me 6-12 months to get out the sandbox or whatever to actually start getting some kind of revenue. If I can start getting that faster, then the domain's kind of paying itself back like real quick, just on its own. Forget about like any other inherent value you have in there. So, and that's not to say that they all take off and they all really quickly and they're all great, but like generally, like we just as a broad picture, we just see like a lot of our results more quickly. Yeah.
You can tell me what you think about this, but from my experience, just looking at the marketplaces, like Empire Flippers, all the marketplaces, and monitoring the Facebook groups, because I see this a lot in the Facebook groups. People are active. So if you're I actually think I agree with you that the time to revenue is probably shortened, but I think where maybe there is a consideration to be made is, will you get a lower valuation if your model is, if you're running a flipping model, if you're running a site, for 1 or 2 years and then you want to exit on it, are you going to get a lower multiple because it's built on an expired domain? I don't have data for this. I just have a gut feeling, because I see on Facebook pages where people are buying and selling sites, they say, I'm looking for a site with these metrics, not built out on an expired domain. I've even seen that. I know one of the main sort of acquisition managers for Domain Magnet, which is a sort of an acquirer of websites. They're looking for sites that aren't built out on expired domains. At least I see him posting on Facebook groups this exact thing. Now, whether he's acquiring those sites for himself or Domain Magnet, I'm not quite sure. But then in on the marketplaces, I think that there is maybe I don't know if you're part of in the Investing.io community or some of these other sort of communities that do roundups of all of the deals. In those deal reports, they'll say pros, cons, opportunities, risks, and it always says in the risk section, built on an expired domain, right? And so people, I don't know, if you're dealing with maybe a savvy buyer, they're going to be like, oh, well, maybe that's not as big of a risk as people are mentioning here. But maybe you're dealing with a less than savvy buyer, and they're going to see it as a risk, and they might not give you as big of a multiple. So that's something else to consider, I think.
So what I would say is like, it's down to the domains really need to be vetted well. So when I'm saying in general, we see really positive results, or in general, we see really positive results, or faster growth and things with opposed to like fresh domains. Like I'm describing the domains that we vetted and that were good. Like the large majority of domains that you see come up at auction are not. We wouldn't pick them. Like, and I mean like 99.9%. Like, there's only so many that you would kind of want to pick up. So if you are picking them right and you get the right domain, then you're going to see results. I think there's definitely a fear among some people, and I don't see it that often. It's funny that you mention it, that people say it's not built on an H domain. Maybe they've been burnt by picking up a bad domain in the past, but also I think there's a fear that Google might catch up one day or something, that eventually, because you use an H domain, that Google will catch up with that, and you're going to lose all your traffic to your site, which I just don't believe either. And
I don't believe that. I don't believe that Google will penalize sites, but whether that risk is real or perceived, if people are perceiving it as a risk because they're not as savvy, if you're selling your site, what does it matter? What does it matter if it's a real risk or not? So if they view it as a risk, then it's risk.
I think it comes to, if you're using a new domain and then you're selling a site, you can say, I know the full history of this domain because I bought it. I built everything. I did all the links. I built all the links like, white hat kind of way, like completely squeaky clean. Whereas you're saying, if it's built on an H domain, then I don't really know the full history, like, because I haven't always owned it. I think that's probably where the angle of like, the thing that they're saying, trying to make squeaky clean and good. There's also people that people can say it's not built on an H domain. They've done a terrible job at like building links and stuff like that.
Right.
It might be worse than the H domain version. But if you look at some H domains that were genuine businesses in the past that have naturally acquired links, and maybe have some great kind of news site links from the New York Times or the BBC or whatever, like hell yeah, like I want that like domain. To build a site on if it's appropriate for the niche. So I think far outweighs.
And just going back to the topic, like I feel like for guys maybe like you and I, you're looking at expired domains, they're probably not overrated because we understand where an expired domain fits in with the whole with all the SEO strategies, right? But I think what I mean when expired domains are overrated, when I see people talking about expired domains now, it's like that's going to be the panacea that prevents you from whatever. It's going to be the one that skyrockets your traffic, and it's like, well, that's actually not the case. Like if only I build out a site on an expired domain, I'm going to be able to see results, and it's like probably not. Like actually, that's probably not what's going to get you to see results. But if you already know how to get results, then it is going to be a benefit, like you're saying. Like if you've already built out a successful site.
Yeah, I mean, that's come to my last point, which is, I guess, because we're doing it at scale, like the one thing that if you are able to build multiple sites on H domains over time, if you've got the time or the investment or whatever to do that, what we have found as well, especially Adam and I have been working with H domains for a while, is that you can't tell up front or in advance, but semi-regularly you'll just get an outstanding result, and it almost pays for everything, all the other ones
pays
you
for
didn't
everything
get
else,
the outstanding results for. So the reason that's kind of another reason it's not doesn't make sense, because if you just buy one, you might not get that result. But that's another reason why I think they're not overrated, is because if you actually are able to build out many, that statistically you're going to get that standout one. And it's not like 1 in 100, it's kind of like way less than that, but like you're just going to get that one that really takes off and just suddenly becomes a huge site.
And to be honest, I haven't built, I bought one expired domain and I'm building out a site on it. And the site that I just purchased was built out on an expired domain. But I mean, you've probably built out way more sites on expired domains. So yeah, I mean, like if you're building out every single site, like let's say you have 10 sites that are built out on expired domains, every single one was built with the exact same methodology, right? We're going to go after low competition keywords, and we're going to internally link in the same way, and it's the same design across all sites, and you have a process for establishing EAT and all this stuff. And then the one site that takes off, is that because of the expired domain or not? Well, yeah, I mean, like maybe there's good evidence to say that it is because of the expired domain. But especially if you've built out a data set of 10 sites all in the same, in the similar way, but it could also be the niche, right? I mean, it's tough to know. But yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Like it makes sense. 100% makes sense. And yeah, I think, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah. I think I agree with you on the undervalued as well. Cause, if you've got 100, 150, 200 links with your age domain, the cost in time or money to get those links or acquire those links is way more than the value that you normally pay for a domain. So I totally agree there as well.
Yeah. And I think you actually have to do that calculation. Like I actually went back, I actually tried to negotiate a deal with ODYS on that 10,000 domain. I'm like, I'm valuing this domain at $6,000. I'm like, here's how I'm valuing it. And then they came back with a response. They're just like, well, if we do this cost per link and whatever, they had this calculation for it. But to me, it was just like, well, you're calculating in like, I don't know, 500 junk links that are just going to come to the site anyways for just existing. Like they were calculating in some junk links, right? And it's just like, well, here are the actual high value links and what I would pay for those high value links if I wasn't buying this expired domain. Those are the links and only those links are the ones that I'm valuing. So again, you have to sort of you have to have a valuation process. I think for the most part, they're undervalued for the most part, but there are some cases where you can pay a way more just because maybe you're buying it off of a premium marketplace, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we've spoken about, one of our customers quite a lot on the podcast, but in just over a year now, his site's doing just shy of $40,000 a month. Site's worth 1.6 million. That was, maybe I don't know if I've done the math right there, but a lot in just a year, and that was built on an age domain. And he paid, I can't remember if it was $30,000 or $40,000, and it's not a powerful domain, right? It's I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'd say it's in the 30s or something like that. It's not because it was an expensive domain. It's not because he paid a lot of money for it. He got lucky on that, and he got lucky, but it's got great backlink profile, and for good reason. And would I have paid that without knowing what the results were going to be? No. But does it look like great value now? Yeah. Does it? It really does. So, I think you can. The problem is that you can't. You've looked at this domain that you were looking at for 10,000 that you were trying to get for 6. Maybe you get great results with it. Maybe you wouldn't. But it's because you just don't know. And that's the hard thing with trying to put a value on it. And I've seen great results with really low authority domains, but as well, and they've done really, really well. So it's a big mix. Anyway, we've got 3 left. We've failed miserably at doing 5 minutes each, so I'm going to try and keep it on these ones. So I think we're at an hour 10 minutes so far. So diversify your site before diversifying your portfolio.
So this one, I mean, it says what it is. Basically, I think people diversify their portfolio way too early. People are building up their sites to a few $1,000s, and then they're wanting to start new sites. I'm not sure if that's because they believe that there's a risk, to their site, and they want to sort of spread out that risk across multiple sites. But I think there's a lot to be done to diversify the risk of an individual site before you actually start to branch out and create new sites. So I actually think, the obvious ways to diversify your site is obviously traffic. I don't believe that that's easy, especially for people who are using SEO, it's like, well, it's not as easy to just say, well, I'm going to go do Pinterest, right? Or I'm going to go do other social media, or I'm going to try to whatever, do some direct traffic with email marketing. I think that that's very, very hard to do. But I think that the easier way to diversify is in the monetization and in the post types. So obviously monetization, like, I mean, if you're only seeing one type of monetization channel and then you want to go diversify your portfolio, I think it's too early. Obviously ads and affiliate, diversifying from, between affiliate programs, having multiple affiliate programs. I also have been setting up a lot of unique partnerships with companies. Partnerships is a great one. I mean, that could be a podcast for another time. Yeah. Digital products, info products. Like, I would start developing out those monetization channels. Every single niche, I think, can have an info product, $10 info product up to a $200 info product. I think that you should develop that out. I think it's harder to do, which is why a lot of people don't go down that route. But I think it makes sense to do that. And then in terms of like post types, I don't necessarily mean like informational content and commercial content. I mean that, like, you should have articles that are targeting, high competition keywords, low competition keywords, different post types. Maybe some are, obviously, like, I don't know, how-to guides. Maybe others are like tips guides. Maybe others are, just different types of informational type guides and content structures. Same with the commercial content. Like, I see a lot of sites that are just really sort of roundup review heavy, and they don't have a lot of comparison type articles, or they don't have a lot of individual product reviews. Like, I know individual product reviews, they don't have a lot of search volume, but I think it helps develop out the cluster. I think it sort of bulletproofs your site against algorithms, because it's showing like, okay, like, here's a roundup of five different products, and each one of those products also has an individual review. So yeah. I think it sort of bulletproofs those roundups a bit more. I think people are too eager to sort of start new sites. They got sort of shiny object syndrome a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, I can't understand that. The risk if you get hit by an algorithm update and you've only got one site and your livelihood's now depending on it. Then, like, I can see why people would want to do it. But no, I totally agree from what you've just said. Like, it is very easy to skip over too soon. I think some of those things can still be affected by like an algorithm update. So if you've got an info product, well, if nobody's coming to your site anymore, they're not even going to see the info product either. So I think, I agree. And one thing I would say, that diversifying traffic is really hard, but it's really worthwhile doing, because that's almost probably the best diversification you can do. If you can get a real good like community together, or build up another traffic source. One of my favorite ways of doing that is Facebook groups, actually. And generally I just have like a bar at the top of my site, or some kind of not an in-face pop-up, but somebody just says, join our Facebook group. And when they join the Facebook group, I use a plugin, a Chrome plugin called Group Leads. I don't know if you've heard of it. But it allows, basically what it does is when you ask questions, if people want to join the group, you offer them the opportunity to put in their email address to get updates from you. And this Group Leads plugin can integrate with your email provider, so like a MailChimp or something like that.
Cool.
So when you click approve on the button, it just automatically puts their email address into your MailChimp or whatever. So you're building a mailing list, and Facebook groups are great, much better than Facebook pages, where half your audience doesn't see the posts, but on Facebook groups, that's much better, and you can start getting some engagement. So especially if you've got a site with a lot of traffic, you can kind of build that Facebook group reasonably quickly. And then, like in the early days, until the Facebook group's got quite a few people, or the mailing list's got quite a few people, you're just letting it grow, right? And then one day you can then start promoting your info products, or your courses, or your affiliate deals, or kind of whatever else there is there. But if you can kind of that's the panacea almost, isn't it? If you can build up a really big group, a really big following there, then
yeah, I've never done that, but that sounds like, yeah, I definitely should do that. You and I should probably talk more, because I'm curious to know more about how you set that all up. But have you found good conversions? Like, how big are some of your groups?
So I have a few groups that are kind of in the thousands.
Right.
I haven't used them enough, but I know from like niche website builders, we started out with Facebook groups, and that's kind of helped us kind of with our growth of the business. But of course, like, why not? I mean, I guess for some niches it's going to work better than others, but it's still great. And then you can kind of get some. I've got get some moderators in there, kind of moderating it, and then kind of answering a lot of the questions that kind of and get it into a really good active group, I guess. So once you kind of get to that stage, you can. It's a bit of a longer game, right? Because you've got to wait for that list to grow and those group members to grow. But if you're planning to keep the site for a while and you want it to be a genuine business down the road, it's a huge asset.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I've never experimented with. I think that, diversifying traffic is very, very hard. I mean, I've done maybe a little bit with Pinterest, but I find that to be challenging. I think Facebook groups is definitely a good way to go. I've just never done it, but I mean, all of those things should be taken close to its potential before I think you start to diversify, or at least have the systems running in the background. Like, even if even just having that pop-up bar, saying join our Facebook group, like even just having that enabled on your site, just so that on the back end, it's collecting emails and, it's directing people to the Facebook group. Like, just having that enabled should happen before you think about, starting a new site, because, I think it bulletproofs it a lot better.
Awesome. Okay, move on to the next one. So, build a portfolio in a single vertical. And I really like this one because I've never done it, but I've recently been thinking about doing that. So, tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, so I've talked to lots of guys who have portfolios of sites, maybe 4, 5, 6 sites, and they're all in random, disparate niches. Like, they're one's in automobile, and one's in fitness, and one's in whatever. And I think that it becomes hard to leverage the systems that you've built with your first site. So this is just something I've done, and I've found that starting a second site in this similar vertical, you can get going a lot faster. You can share resources. So, for example, I have pulled writers off one site into another site, right? So writers can now write across websites because they're experts in that same vertical. Right. And that's been really helpful, because hiring and training writers is a very long process, right? Trying to hire writers and find good ones and train them up on your standards. If you already have writers that know how know your guidelines and have already been trained up and writing for you for 6 months, well, then it's very easy to just take them and put them on another site right away. So you're already producing like really high quality content on day one. I think it helps with link building. You've already established a ton of relationships, right? And as you go into new sites in similar verticals, you can literally just email the people that you've already emailed, and they're way more likely to work with you. And those partnerships and relationships, they can go beyond just link building. You're also very familiar with the affiliate products, the different products that are in the niche, and potentially similar affiliate managers. And you're also familiar with the keyword research. So you can recognize opportunities a lot quicker. And actually that's probably like one way that you should think about like starting a second site, is that you actually see a keyword opportunity that may or may not, you could probably put it on, your site, but it would probably be better on a new site. Well, it's like, well, that's that's a good direction to go. Just start another site, and develop out that keyword research specifically for that. So yeah, I just think it's way easier to, if you're thinking about sort of building a portfolio, to do it in a single vertical, especially if you know that vertical really well. Like if you're, I don't know, maybe you're somebody who's worked in, I don't know, clean tech or clean energy, your whole life. Well, you could see how it would be very easy to have, 2, 3, or 4 sites in that sort of vertical.
Yeah. I love that. Like leveraging all those existing partnerships, relationships, team. That like totally makes sense to me. I've got a question for you on that. Like, would you start a site where you end up targeting the same keywords and the same articles?
So I've never done that. But I know some black hat SEOs that have done that. They really try to sort of establish themselves. Like, I want to try to get as many pages ranking on number 1 for this keyword across different websites. I've never done that. However, I could see myself doing that. Not as like, I could see myself doing that. I've never done it. I think that the sites have to be, well, at least the way that I've set up my sites, they're separate enough where there's enough keyword potential to go after completely new keyword topics, even though you could probably cover some of the topics, some of the same articles. I've just never done that.
Yeah, I guess you can pick. You could potentially pick some of the best articles, because the way I was thinking about it was exactly what you say. If you're onto a good thing and you can dominate the SERP, so if you can be in position 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 or whatever for a SERP, for a keyword, all the better, right? Because you're much more likely to get hit, and that's a good thing. I think you just need to. I guess what you could do is just some of those best performing articles. You probably wouldn't want to do an exact copy of the site, because you could come up with issues with Google potentially for that kind of stuff, I guess, where it's kind of starts to look like a clone of the site. But I think potentially if you take your best, a bit like our tomb raiding SEO technique, like if you take like the 20% best articles, but then mix them in with a whole bunch of other articles, because you know that you've been able to rank for those with the authority of the site that you have. And you know that, because there's one thing looking at the traffic numbers, like you say in Ahrefs, is a whole different ballgame looking at them in Google Analytics when you're kind of ranking for them. And if you can pick those ones, and then why not?
Yeah, well, sort of on that topic, there's a media company I know, Pillar 4 Media, and they acquire sites in the sleep space. They have a big portfolio of sites in the sleep space. Basically, any mattress keyword that you see on page 1, like it's their company. Like they have 4 or 5 or more now sites in the sleep space that are targeting. They were all owned separately, right? They were all owned separately at one time, but they've done sort of this M&A play where, okay, we're going to acquire all the sites that are ranking on number 1 for this particular keyword, because we know that we know how much money it makes and how valuable it is. And they've gone out and they've sourced these sites and acquired these sites, and mostly in private deals. And so that is a play, like that is 100% a play. And I mean, and you can see how, again, like it's very easy to bring in a site into your portfolio if you understand the keywords, if you understand sort of the opportunities. And I mean, if you just acquire a mattress website and you have 4 other mattress websites, it's like, well, I know that this new website that we just acquired doesn't have these 4 or 5 articles, and we need to produce it for that, right? So yeah, I mean, I like that play a lot. I'm building mostly my sites from scratch, so I'm sort of doing the same strategy, but building from scratch, not acquiring. But
yeah, we got a customer who maybe he sold it to them, but like he got in early in the mattress space and sold his site for a fortune, but years ago now. But like mattresses is always talked about because it's got a reputation for people being savage in that niche for all sorts of stories of like black hat SEO tactics to try and take competitors down, because it is a surprisingly profitable niche, So yeah, yes, matches is an interesting one. I wouldn't get into it because it's just.
I've heard that it is like super cutthroat. So I'm sure that there's all sorts of wild stuff going on. I'm sure the commissions are amazing, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. They must be, because it's super profitable, I think. So, okay, on to the last one. The biggest competitive advantage you have is your team.
Yeah, I think that I think people a lot of site owners view their writers as kind of disposable. Like, hey, we're going to bring on a writer to write these 20 articles, and then that's it. Then we're just going to fire them or not give them work. And I don't view my writers like that. Like, the writers are the ones that are producing your product. When I was running my SaaS company, we went out, we raised a bunch of money, and when we were pitching in front of investors, they always wanted to know like the team, they want to know the team, the traction, and the technology, right? And team was always number one. Like, they want to know about the team first. Who's on the team, what their expertise is, the value that they bring, the roles that they play. That was more of an investable sort of criteria than the traction or the technology, because it really comes down to how you execute. So for me, my writers are like a very, very integral part of the team. I pay them well. I bring them into the fold in terms of like the strategy around the site and why we're producing this type of content, and how this content fits into the overall structure of the site, and how we make money with the content. So they understand the monetization angles. They get raises over time. Like, I'm managing them basically. I mean, they're not employees, but I'm managing them basically like employees, right? I'm saying like, there's structures in terms of like, what happens when you perform well, and what happens when you don't, and the expectations are laid out. And so I'm really treating them as a part of the company rather than just these disposable pieces that you can just sort of, get rid of at any time. I think that does help me with retaining writers long-term, attracting higher quality writers. But they're truly the ones who are producing your product. And so like, you have to see them as a competitive advantage. When I look at other sites, I can tell immediately, especially in my niches, I can tell immediately whether that content was written by an expert or not, just based on their level of understanding. And we can take down those other sites very, very easily. Like, if we recognize a site is just producing garbage content, we know that our team, with our expertise, their level of expertise, they're experts in what they do, right? They all have insane amount of expertise in what they do. We're going to be able to take them down because we're going to be able to produce higher quality content. And so, yeah, the pay is reflective of that. How you treat them is reflective of that. So yeah, I just think more site owners need to view it as that's your competitive advantage, not what you know about SEO, not all these tactics. It's your team that's going to help you sort of get you to success.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is the reason why we at Niche Website Builders, we didn't go down like freelancer route. Like, all of our writers are kind of hired full time. For my own portfolio, they are actually employees. They're full-time employees that I have hired through my business. They actually sit in with the team in Niche Website Builders, so they can just get that kind of bigger team experience and all kind of share some of the knowledge and the training that goes on at Niche Website Builders. But I totally agree. We definitely have like competitors that have got like 400 writers on the books. They're all freelancers and they just do spot work here and there. It's just not the same. Like one week they're writing social media posts for somebody and writing a book, and the next week they're writing some reason. Like, we get to train them up, and they do it day in, day out. They get to know exactly what they want. They get that constant feedback loop. And like, that was when we started, that was integral for us. Every writer became an employee, and that's their full-time focus. So I totally agree.
I think it's hard when you're Say it again.
No, I was just going to say, you don't want to be training new people again and again either.
Right.
Like, it's a headache.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like the amount of time that it takes to find a writer and train a writer and sort of make sure that they understand the guidelines. I mean, it's a multi-month process. It really is. I don't understand these people who can, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they produce content, high quality content and not, just sort of view they're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire them for, 100,000 words. And then that's it. It's just like, well, they're not going to care about that 100,000 words unless they know like that they have continued to work with you, that they're invested in the project. They know, the importance of the project. Like I actually tried to preach to my team, like, here are the actual, like, here's who we're helping and why we're helping and sort of kind of the mission behind the site. I know it sort of sounds like, kind of, sort of sounds kind of dumb, but like, especially in the diet space, I recently last year started a site in the diet space, and it was because I just thought there was bad quality content, right? Like it was like, there's a lot of misinformation in the diet world. And it's like, if these writers understand, like, there's a purpose here. Like if somebody were to Google these topics and they were to land on this page, and I pointed out to them, this is what's ranking number 1 right now. Can you not see how that user would be misinformed by the information on this page? It's like, we're actually trying to change a paradigm here, right? Like we're trying to do, some, not just write content for the sake of writing content, but we're actually trying to create an impact. Well, they can buy into that a little bit more, right? They understand the mission and the purpose behind it. And when you hire somebody, it shouldn't be just like, okay, I'm going to hire them for 100,000 words. It's like, you're bringing them on board with the mission, right? So it's like, you're coming on board and we're going to keep you here sort of long-term, and give you continuous work and pay you, more than, pay you enough so that you care about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree with that. There was one last thing I was going to say, but it totally escaped me. So I'll kind of leave it there, I think. It has escaped me. So yeah, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've done an hour and a half, Ben. So I think we'll wrap it up. And I'd like to say thanks for suggesting the topic. And hopefully it might be long, but hopefully it has covered some interesting stuff for people. So thanks for taking the time today. And speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're listening to the podcast version of this episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please rate and review, as this will allow us to grow our audience and create more shows like this one. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to be the first to know about any new episodes that we release. Until the next episode, goodbye.